In Greenwood Falls, a quiet suburb where the street lights come on just before the crickets start to hum. People used to say the Taylors had everything figured out. Melissa Taylor was the kind of woman others trusted instantly. A school therapist who always remembered a student's favorite color, a colleague's birthday, a neighbor's sick dog. Her husband, Daniel, was steady, gentle, and loyal to a fault. They'd been married for nearly 10 years. Two professionals with modest dreams and a rhythm that looked, from the outside, like happiness. But on a cold autumn night, that calm was shattered. Daniel Taylor, found collapsed on the living room floor, barely conscious. Paramedics rushed into the hospital, where routine blood tests revealed something chilling. Sedatives, powerful ones, in his system. He wasn't prescribed any. What began as a medical mystery soon evolved into one of the most unsettling domestic crimes Greenwood Falls had ever seen. And at its center was a woman trained to heal, now accused of using her knowledge to harm. At Greenwood Elementary, Melissa Taylor was admired. She was calm under pressure, attentive, and had a reputation for being able to reach even the most withdrawn children. Parents described her as warm, safe, trustworthy. Her office smelled faintly of lavender and dry erase markers, the signature scent of comfort and order. But behind that poised smile, prosecutors would later claim a very different story was brewing. Co-workers recalled how she had grown distant over months, often lost in thought, sometimes appearing on edge after personal phone calls. At home, Daniel noticed subtle changes. Her patience wore thin. Her conversations became clipped, defensive. She began spending long hours alone in her study, supposedly reviewing case notes. Then came the first dizzy spell. Daniel thought it was exhaustion, the kind that comes from too many late nights and too much coffee. But when it happened again and again, always after dinner, a quiet dread started to grow. By midsummer, Daniel had begun documenting everything. He wrote down what he ate when he felt sick and what Melissa had prepared. Sometimes he'd wake in the night with nausea and trembling and find her beside him, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. One afternoon, while she was at work, he installed a small camera near the kitchen counter, the spot where she mixes nightly drinks. What he captured, police later said, was unmistakable. The footage allegedly showed Melissa stirring something white and powdery into his glass before dinner, looking over her shoulder, pausing, and then continuing as if nothing had happened. When detectives searched the house weeks later, they discovered prescription bottles belonging not to Daniel, nor to Melissa, but to a former patient from the district's therapy program. The puzzle was coming together, but it was only the beginning. When authorities obtained a warrant to search Melissa's laptop, they expected to find typical correspondence: therapy notes, lesson plans, emails. What they found instead were search histories that painted a darker curiosity. Among the entries, how much benzodiazepine is too much for adults? Can anti-anxiety meds cause blackouts? And then, more chillingly, can AI tools simulate poison combinations? Fast-acting toxins that leave the body quickly. Prosecutors claimed she had turned to ChatGPT to explore the chemistry of sedatives and their detection windows. While investigators acknowledged that no direct recipe was found, the pattern was undeniable. A breadcrumb trail of intent disguised as research. Neighbors who once described her as compassionate now found themselves rewatching news footage in disbelief. The woman who guided children through trauma was now accused of methodically incapacitating her husband, one glass at a time. When questioned, Melissa insisted her searches were purely academic. She told detectives she'd been researching accidental overdoses, that it was part of her work to understand the consequences of misused medication. But investigators noted the timing. Each wave of Daniel's illness coincided precisely with her online activity. Medical toxicologists testified that the substances in Daniel's blood, low-dose sedatives layered over several days, were consistent with deliberate microdosing, not an accidental slip. And that, they said, was what made the case so chilling. This wasn't a sudden act of rage or passion. It was a slow, clinical manipulation, controlled, measured, and intentional. In court filings, prosecutors described Melissa as a professional who weaponized compassion. She knew how to soothe, how to earn trust, and how to exploit it. As one investigator put it, she didn't just break her oath as a therapist, she inverted it. Psychologists called to testify painted clashing portraits. Some describe Melissa as deeply narcissistic, a woman unable to tolerate loss of control, whose outward empathy masked a craving for dominance. Others believed she suffered from severe emotional burnout, overwhelmed by the grief and trauma of her students, bringing that darkness home. Whatever the truth, the case forced the public to confront an uncomfortable question. How does someone trained to heal the mind cross into calculated harm? Media outlets debated endlessly about the role of technology in her alleged crime. Had AI given her access to dangerous knowledge, or had it merely amplified impulses she already had? Each new headline blurred the line between curiosity and criminality, between the tools we build and the hands that wield them. As the trial entered its final weeks, the courtroom atmosphere shifted. What began as a local scandal had become a national reflection on intent, trust, and technology. The defense argued there was no proof Melissa meant harm, that Daniel's symptoms could have been psychosomatic, stress-induced, that the searches were intellectual curiosity twisted into narrative by prosecutors hungry for spectacle. But the jury listened closely when Daniel took the stand. He described nights when he could feel consciousness slipping, the terror of realizing that someone who loved him might be orchestrating it. He said, "It wasn't the fear of dying that broke me. It was realizing she could watch me fade and still look calm." When the verdict came, the courtroom fell silent. Melissa Taylor was convicted of attempted poisoning and unlawful use of controlled substances. The sentencing, though modest compared to violent crimes, carried weight far beyond its years because of what it symbolized. It wasn't just betrayal, it was corruption of care. Today, the Taylor house in Greenwood Falls stands quiet, the garden overgrown, the blinds always drawn. The school replaced Melissa's office months ago. Her framed degrees still hang in evidence storage somewhere. Her story endures because it forces us to look at the fragility of trust, the thin boundary between help and harm, between intellect and obsession, and it asks a haunting question for the modern age. When technology can offer anyone access to information once reserved for experts, where we place accountability, in the tool or the mind that uses it? For Daniel, life goes on quietly. Friends say he's rebuilding, learning to cook again, drinking only from sealed bottles now. The woman once known for her empathy became, in the end, a case study in how darkness can wear a mask of calm and how betrayal can live right beside care, hidden in plain sight.